Our guest today, Shawna Pinkerton, is a harm reduction worker in Dryden and a former drug user. I first heard Shawna on CBC's morning show, The Current, with Matt Galloway. Shawna was a member of a panel discussing the decriminalization of small amounts of illicit drugs. She also spoke to the Rotary Club in Dryden last March and comes highly recommended by President Patty Van. I'm happy that she's able to speak to us today. Please welcome Shawna.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Okay.
Thank you. It's nice to see everyone. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Carol and I connected after she got a hold of me, after she heard me on the show. She just started tossing all these thoughts at me, and we just kind of, well, she just got moving. And so I jumped on board to help with Rotary and whatever I could do to help both communities, because both communities are struggling. So my name is Shawna Pinkerton. I have a quite the extent history of drug use. I believe it stemmed from childhood trauma. Childhood trauma, trauma in general, I guess. By the time I was 11, I was drinking, I was smoking marijuana. By the time I was 12, I had smoked crack for the first time. By the time I was 15, I was a alcoholic and completely addicted to THC. When I just turned 17, I moved out to Vancouver with my boyfriend, and we landed in Abbotsford, and the first night we got there, we smoked crack, and it was just downhill path from there. It took us about 9 months before we were on East Hastings, which is the worst skid row in all of North America, not just Canada, all of North America. It's a port city, so lots of drugs come in off the ships. I became addicted to heroin. I should back up a little bit. When I first got there, I tried going to school, and I was living in Abbotsford, and the only two friends I had at school were, one was murdered by the Abbotsford killer, and the other one was raped and beaten till she couldn't remember anything. So that was terrifying in itself. I quit and never went back to school after that day. The whole time I was on the street, Robert Pickton was out murdering prostitutes. I was prostituting. I was hustling. So I was selling drugs. I was transporting drugs for drug dealers. I stole from grocery stores. I started off stealing like purses and wallets from grocery stores. When I got caught from everywhere in the entire Lower Mainland, I moved to hospitals. I started stealing from people that were visiting in hospitals or people that were in the hospital. And then it turned into hospices. I don't know what it is, but every time I get in the shower and I close my eyes to wash my hair, I envision this woman's eyes. She was in a hospice and she was laying in her bed, and I walked in and her eyes popped open and they were yellow, like she had to have had jaundice severe. And she just stared at me. She just watched me the whole time. The button was in her hand. She could have pressed it, and she let me take her wallet. She watched me walk away with it. And that's ingrained in my head. And I came back to Dryden. I guess I should say my mom and my boyfriend's father flew out to Vancouver. They walked the streets till they found us. When my mom found me, I was smoking crack. She tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and I told her to wait for a minute. Well, I did my blast. I turned around and I looked at her like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, it was just an average day, not realizing how much time had gone by. like just in this completely different dream world. I was, while I was in Vancouver, that was the second time, sorry, I was brought back to Dryden. I had extreme trench foot. I couldn't walk for roughly 4 months. The skin was worn right down to the bone of my feet. And then I ended up getting on methadone, and I started to get my life together. Then I got pregnant. I had a son. Wasn't doing too much with my life as in terms of working or anything like that, but at least I wasn't using drugs. I was on methadone. I was doing okay. Got involved in the needle exchange program, helping getting that up and running in Dryden. Dryden was very against having a needle exchange. It was looked bad for business. So I wrote a letter saying what happens when we don't have needle exchanges, what would happen. And that night they passed the bill, and we were finally allowed to get needles exchanged. So I worked with them to get that up and running. I've had many ups and downs. I did relapse in 2008, went back out to Vancouver. This time I was addicted to morphine. Not when I left Vancouver, I was addicted to heroin. Now I was addicted to morphine. I got out to Vancouver, and the heroin didn't do anything for me because the morphine was stronger than the heroin was. This was when I first got introduced to Insight. So it's the safe injection site in Vancouver. It's the first one ever in Canada. Dr. Gabor Mate started it. So when you walk in, they ask you for what they call a handle, which is just another name, so you don't have to use your real name. So you don't have to say, I'm Shawna Pinkerton. I think mine was Bear 98 or something like that is what my handle was. You tell them what type of drugs you're using. They're then escorted into a sanitary safe injection site booth where it's got sanitary medical station with all the supplies, nurses on hand with all the equipment. They also do like wound care. Like at the time I had extremely, it was almost fractured ankle. It was huge, and they wrapped it for me every day. So anyways, you use on that side, and then you go over to the other side, and they like you to stay for about 10 to 15 minutes to make sure you're not going to overdose over there. On that side is where you find more your peer support. So now you've got your workers that are recovering addicts. There was a detox upstairs. This is where all the referrals came from. So if you needed a referral for OW, you needed to get onto methadone, you needed, any of that kind of stuff. This is before the replacement therapy came out, but it was where you could get the referrals to get into starting to get your life back together, should you want to do so, or just managing for the night for that matter. So it made it a lot easier. It wasn't alleys that I was shooting up in anymore. Like I would lay down in an alley, have my neck tied off, and have somebody shooting my neck up in the middle of an alley that's full of urine and feces and rats running around. And so this Insight we used all the time. And coming to current time, last year, we had a series of deaths in a very, very short period of time. Some were suicides, some were suspicious deaths, some were overdoses. And I decided it was time to do something. I couldn't sit back anymore and watch my town. My parents brought me back here to be safe. I was no longer safe here. I wanted safe for my children and for everybody else's children.